Have you ever looked at your life and wondered, when did I stop feeling like myself? Maybe this is because you've spent so much of your life taking care of everybody else that somewhere along the way, you disappeared. Maybe you spend so much of your time taking care of other people that you forgot what you actually want, what you actually need. Maybe even making small decisions feel surprisingly difficult. Or maybe you've spent many years being the responsible one, and now you're not really sure who you are outside of that role. In the last two videos, we've been talking about identity diffusion, the idea that some people never really had the opportunity to develop a stable sense of self because they spent so much of their childhood adapting to everyone else's needs. Today, I want to help you recognize what that actually looks like in everyday life. And in this video, I'm going to share with you 5 signs that this may be happening in your own life as well. And as I go through these, I wanted to encourage you not to judge yourself, but just to lean in with curiosity and simply notice what feels familiar, because awareness is always the first step towards change. Sign 1. You struggle to answer simple questions about yourself. For example, if I asked you, what do you enjoy? What are your values? What are things that are important to you? What would you do if no one expected anything from you this weekend? Would those questions feel easy to answer? Or would you have to hit the pause button and really think about the answers? Many people with identity diffusion don't lack intelligence or insight, not at all. They've simply spent so many years asking, what does everybody else need from me? That they really stopped to ask themselves, what do I need? What do I want? And over time, something interesting begins to happen. When you've ignored your own preferences long enough, you stop expecting yourself to even have them. That's really sad, right? So when someone asks, what do you want? Your mind doesn't immediately have an answer, not because there isn't one, but because you've spent years practicing a completely different question. For years, their attention has been trained to ask, what does everyone else need from me? That they rarely stop to ask themselves, like I said, what do I need and what's important to me? And over time, your own preferences become harder to access, not because they're gone, but because they've been buried underneath years of meeting everyone else's expectations. That's very different from not having interests. It's often about never having permission to explore them. You really can't know yourself if you are never given the opportunity to discover yourself. Isn't that true? Sign 2. You define yourself by the roles you play. So, maybe you're the helper, the caretaker, the responsible one, the fixer, the peacemaker. These roles may describe what you do, but they don't necessarily describe who you are. Now think about it this way. If I took away every role you had to play, like you're no longer the parent or the spouse, right? The therapist to your friends and family, the employee, the caregiver, who would still be there? That's the question identity diffusion asks you to answer. Because sometimes one of the questions I ask my clients are, who are you besides being dependable? Who are you outside of the roles? And often they don't really know how to answer. And certainly that is nowhere near a personal failure. It's just what I found is often the result of spending years believing your value came from what you did for other people rather than who you were and are as a person. Sign 3. You feel guilty whenever you choose yourself. Now, I don't know, maybe saying no makes you feel uncomfortable. Maybe taking time for yourself feels really selfish. Maybe resting feels unproductive. Maybe you finally sit down And instead of relaxing, your mind immediately starts creating another list of things you should be doing. That's because your nervous system has learned to associate productivity with safety and worth. If you've spent years believing your worth came from being useful, needed, available, then putting yourself first can actually feel wrong, uncomfortable. But not because it's wrong, but because it's unfamiliar. So remember, guilt isn't always a sign you're doing something wrong. Sometimes guilt is simply a sign that you're doing something different. And when you've spent years living one way, different can feel uncomfortable before it starts to feel anywhere near healthy. And different can feel uncomfortable before, like I said before, it starts to feel healthy for you again. Sign 4. Your identity changes depending on who you're with. This one, of course, surprises nobody. You may notice that you're one version of yourself with your family. You might be another version with your partner. You might be another version of yourself at work or another with friends. And you might even notice that maybe you're changing your opinions depending on who you're with. Maybe you're agreeing with things you don't actually believe, or automatically believe in the version of yourself that keeps everybody else comfortable. Now, at first, that may look like flexibility. But over time, I don't know, you begin wondering what version of me is actually me? Now, I get it. All of us adapt somewhat depending on the situation. That's quite normal, correct? But if you constantly become whomever the other people need you to be, then it's worth asking, who am I when I'm completely alone? If no one needed anything from you, who would you naturally become? That's a really important question. And if that question feels difficult, and for many it does, identity diffusion may be part of the reason. And sign 5. You still feel successful, but still disconnected from yourself. This is something I hear often. For example, someone has built a career. Maybe they've raised a family. They've been dependable. They've done everything right. And they're the overfunctioner. And yet they quietly say, I don't know why, but something feels like it's missing. And certainly it has nothing to do with because they failed. Achievement can give you success, but it can't tell you who you are. You can spend years accomplishing things while still never asking, what kind of life do I actually want? I find that's a very different question. So, in closing, if you've recognized yourself in several of these signs, I want you to know something. I think that's really important. That I want you to hear this, that nothing is wrong with you. I want you to really understand that that is true. These are not character flaws. They're simply adaptations. These are the patterns often develop because they once helped you adapt to your environment, mostly your family of origin and your upbringing. They were survival strategies. But survival isn't the same as living authentically. But the good news is that your identity isn't gone, and it hasn't disappeared. It's simply been overshadowed by the roles you've spent years playing. And that's what it means to be rediscovered. In my next and last video in this series, we're going to talk about exactly how to begin rebuilding your identity after years of people-pleasing, caretaking, and putting everyone else first. And of course, if this resonated with you, let me know in the comments, which I love to get the comments, and maybe something that stood out the most, or even any questions you might have. And if you're interested in learning more about healthy relationships or codependency, family of origin healing, and emotional growth, just hit the subscribe button, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.